This episode of Stories from the Vault is brought to you by Petty Merch. Get 15% off your first order with code VAULT at onelovefla.us. This episode contains archival material and discussion involving firearms, violence, religious extremism, and loss of life. Viewer discretion is advised.
Wilshire Unit City, Wilshire Unit 211, GTA just occurred, 3921 Wilshire Boulevard, 3921 Wilshire Boulevard, incident 329, any Wilshire Unit code 2 high.
February 28th, 1993. 76 agents of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms approached a religious compound just outside Waco, Texas. Their mission? Execute a search warrant and arrest leader David Koresh. Inside, Koresh and his followers were already armed, alert, and expecting trouble. What began as a law enforcement operation erupted into a firefight lasting minutes, but leaving a lifetime of consequences. 4 ATF agents died that day. 6 Branch Davidians were killed, and the seeds of a 51-day siege were sown. This is the story of Waco. How fear, faith, and force collided, and how a small compound became a national tragedy. Born Vernon Wayne Howell on August 17th, 1959 in Houston, Texas, David Koresh grew up in a turbulent household. Raised largely by his grandmother and older sister, he struggled with feelings of instability and identity, which shaped his later search for purpose and authority. School was a challenge. Vernon had learning difficulties that required special support, and he faced bullying from classmates. Despite this, he found solace in sports and physical training, developing discipline and resilience at a young age. As a young adult, he explored his faith more deeply, eventually joining the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Vernon challenged traditional interpretations of the scripture, particularly in the book of Revelation, which set him on his path toward leadership within religious movement. In 1981, he moved to Waco, Texas, and joined the Branch Davidians, a small splinter group. He quickly rose in influence, adopting the name David Koresh to reflect his self-perceived spiritual mission. By 1987, following the death of the group's leader, Koresh assumed full control. He introduced new theological teachings, including the belief that he was the only one capable of interpreting certain prophetic texts. Under Koresh's leadership, the Branch Davidians became increasingly insular and heavily armed, preparing for what they believed was an impending apocalyptic confrontation. This combination of charisma, radical theology, and firearms stockpiling eventually drew the attention of federal authorities, setting the stage for the events of 1993. February 28th, 1993. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or ATF, prepared to execute a search and arrest warrant at the Branch Davidian compound. The warrant stemmed from allegations that the group was illegally stockpiling firearms. 76 agents approached the compound under the cover of early morning. Their goal was to take control quickly and safely, but the operation quickly spiraled out of control. The Branch Davidians were armed and ready, fully aware that authorities were coming. A firefight erupted almost immediately. In the chaos, 4 ATF agents were killed and several others were wounded. 6 Branch Davidians also died that day, including individuals caught in the crossfire. The failed raid marked the beginning of a 51-day standoff. Negotiations, surveillance, and tense waiting would dominate the following weeks. What began as a law enforcement operation had quickly escalated into a full-blown siege, capturing national attention and exposing the dangerous mix of faith, weapons, and mistrust. After the initial raid, the Branch Davidians compound transformed from a hidden community into a national spectacle. What remained inside were dozens of adults and children, frightened and resolute, led by David Koresh. Outside, federal agents established a perimeter, prepared for a long and tense confrontation. Koresh refused to surrender. He communicated with negotiators and reporters alike, using a combination of calm reasoning, prophetic language, and occasional threats. He claimed divine authority over the events, insisting that the siege was a part of a larger biblical plan. Every decision he made inside the compound was measured to maintain control over his followers and to prolong the standoff in a way that advanced his religious narrative. Negotiations began immediately. FBI negotiators worked tirelessly to establish trust, speaking to Koresh by phone and eventually arranging for an occasional delivery of essentials. Several children were released during this period, a testament to the negotiators' persistence. However, Koresh consistently refused to surrender fully, believing that giving up would violate divine will. Inside the compound, though, life continued under Koresh's strict supervision. Followers performed daily routines, conducted religious studies, and prepared for what they believed was an imminent apocalypse. Reports from the FBI vault indicate that the compound was heavily fortified, with strategic placement of firearms and barricades designed to defend against external assault. Outside, the FBI engaged in a careful mix of pressure and patience, while tactical teams observed the compound's activity. The media converged on Waco, broadcasting daily updates and putting additional pressure on both the FBI and Koresh. Public opinion began to fracture. Some sympathized with law enforcement, while others feared a tragedy was unfolding. Over the course of the 51 days, the standoff became psychological war. Loudspeakers blared messages, music, and instructions intended to unsettle those inside. Armored vehicles circled the compound, lights were used to disrupt sleep, and negotiators worked around the clock to maintain lines of communication. Koresh, for his part, remained steadfast, issuing sermons and proclamations to reassure his followers and reinforce his control. The FBI's internal reports show frustration and caution. Every decision carried immense risk. A misstep could provoke violence, endangering the lives of those inside and outside the compound. Every day of the standoff was meticulously documented, detailing phone calls, deliveries, sightings of activity, and the psychological state of the group. Despite repeated opportunities for surrender, Koresh remained committed to his belief. Each refusal intensified the standoff, drawing national scrutiny and heightening the sense that the situation could erupt into a catastrophic violence at any moment. By the final weeks, both the FBI and Koresh had settled into a tense rhythm. Negotiations continued, sporadic compliance was observed, but no decisive action was taken by either side. The nation watched, waiting as the story of Waco unfolded in real time. A cautionary tale of faith, firearms, and the perilous balance between law enforcement and civil liberties. April 19th, 1993. After 51 days of standoff, the FBI decided to end the siege. The plan was to introduce tear gas into the Branch Davidian compound, forcing its occupants to evacuate. Armored vehicles approached the building, and gas was pumped through openings in the walls and roof. Negotiators continued to call Koresh, urging him to surrender and release the remaining occupants. But inside, Koresh and his followers refused to abandon their faith or their home. Over the course of hours, fires broke out throughout the compound. The exact cause of the flames remained disputed. Some reports suggest accidental ignition, others point to deliberate actions by individuals inside. Regardless, the result was devastating. 76 people died, including David Koresh, women, and children. The fire consumed much of the compound, leaving only scorched ruins. Federal agents and investigators surveyed the aftermath. Forensic reports documented the layout, bullet trajectories, and points of fire origin. The loss of life shocked the nation, and questions quickly arose about the tactics employed by the FBI and ATF. The Waco siege became a symbol of the dangers of escalation, the consequences of religious extremism, and the high stakes of law enforcement operations against armed groups. It sparked debates over government authority, the use of force, and the balance between protecting public safety and respecting civil liberties. The Waco siege left scars that extended far beyond the charred remains of the compound. In the weeks and months following April 19, 1993, federal agencies conducted exhaustive investigations into the events leading up to, during, and after the siege. Congressional hearings scrutinized the decisions made by the ATF and FBI, examining whether law enforcement had used excessive force or failed to prevent unnecessary deaths. Internal reports revealed the complexity of the operation. Negotiators had worked tirelessly to establish communication and secure the release of children, but the determination of Koresh and the ideological commitment of his followers created an environment where compromise was nearly impossible. For law enforcement, every decision carried enormous risk. The siege sparked widespread public debate. Critics condemned the government for overreach, arguing that the operation demonstrated the dangers of aggressive federal intervention. Supporters defended the agencies, citing the weapons violations and the difficulty of negotiating with a group prepared for armed confrontation. Waco's influence reached far beyond the immediate tragedy. It became a rallying point for militia movements and anti-government groups across the United States. Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, cited Waco as the motivating factor for his actions. The siege also reshaped FBI and ATF policies on handling armed standoffs and high-risk operations. Even decades later, Waco remains a symbol of the tension between faith, freedom, and force. It is studied in law enforcement, legal, and historical contexts as an example of both the challenges of negotiation and the potential consequences of miscalculation. The Branch Davidians' tragedy serves as a stark reminder. When ideology, firearms, and mistrust collide, the results can be catastrophic. Understanding the events of Waco requires examining not just the final moments of the siege, but the years of preparation, belief, and conflict that led to that fateful day. Next time on Stories from the Vault, we turn our attention to another pivotal moment in American history, the Kent State shootings, where student protest and government response collided in a deadly confrontation. So until next time, lock the file, and remember, the truth, no matter how painful, is rarely redacted forever. I'm Kyle Fields. Good night.